Hello, and welcome to Legal Links, a legal information program of the Oregon State Bar. My name's Steve Todd. I'm a pro tem circuit court judge. I serve in Multnomah County, and I'm a member of the Oregon State Bar. The Oregon State Bar regulates the practice of law in this state, including bar admissions and lawyer discipline. The bar also offers a variety of services to its members and to the general public. For the public, our goals are to help you understand your legal rights and responsibilities. On this program, we address common legal questions and we offer information about the legal system in general. Today's topic is ID theft. With me today to talk about ID theft are two executive members of the Oregon State Bar's section on consumer law. Justin Baxter, chair of the consumer law section, is a lawyer in private practice with Baxter & Baxter in Portland. Hope DiCarlo, the chair-elect of the consumer law section, is a lawyer with sole practice in Portland as well. Welcome to you both. Let's start out by talking about what is ID theft. What do we mean by that term?
Sure, Steve. In the consumer litigation context, when we talk about ID theft, we're talking about a criminal using the identifying information, birth date, address, social security number of an innocent victim to obtain credit in the innocent person's name.
So it's not necessarily a specific crime, but it's just that the intent is usually to try and get something you're not really paying for then, right?
That's right. It's not stealing somebody's watch or purse or car so much as it is using that personal information to go out and seek credit or purchase items in the victim's name.
Now, how would this happen? How does ID theft get started?
Well, generally it gets started when someone's personal information has leaked into the wrong hands, either because they've inadvertently recycled old checks or bank statements, or something in some way let their personal information get out of their home. But it can also happen when a third party, such as your financial institution or someone else who has your information, inadvertently loses track of it and the wrong person gets a hold of it.
So it's not necessarily being careless yourself. It could be somebody else has your information as being careless.
That's right.
Okay. Well, how does somebody reduce their risk if this is a common problem? What should we do to avoid it?
Well, I mean, there are sort of certain precautions you can take yourself. You can shred all of your documents that contain your address, identifying numbers like your social security number or your bank account numbers. But there's only so much you can do. I mean, like we discussed before, some of it's in other people's hands.
Okay. Well, what sort of things would you say about companies that sell credit reports? Now that the information gets to them, what if the information is wrong?
Well, I think in the last few years, the existence of credit reporting agencies has come much more into the public's collective consciousness. People are aware of the three major credit bureaus, Experian, Equifax, TransUnion. The first thing that consumers can do to protect their credit reports and their credit ratings is inform themselves, find out what's on that credit report. As a result of a law that was passed in 2003, consumers now have a right to get a free copy of their credit report once a year. The FTC and the credit bureaus working together have created a website called annualcreditreport.com, which consumers can access online copies of their TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian credit reports. I will say, as a sort of general matter, I would caution consumers about being drawn off away from the website to purchase other services from the credit bureaus. Sometimes they're unnecessary, and sometimes consumers can unknowingly waive important rights that they may have under state or federal laws.
So, for example, I've seen some advertisements for something to protect your credit or credit insurance or things like that. Are those services worthwhile?
In general, they're not necessary, and that's the first caution I would give consumers. The fundamental and most important right that a consumer has with regard to their credit report is they can dispute inaccurate information on it. They don't have to pay for it, and they don't have to hire somebody else to do it. A consumer seeing inaccurate information on their credit report can sit down and write a letter to the credit bureaus saying, this is inaccurate and this is why. And that's how we, as consumers, invoke our rights under state and federal law to have accurate credit reports.
Well, it's one thing to just say there's a mistake. Say you paid a bill and it doesn't show up correctly in your credit report. But say you're a victim of ID theft. There are things you know you never bought or places you never been. What do you do if you know you're really a victim of ID theft?
Well, I would start by, if, for example, somebody opened a credit card account in your name, I would start by contacting the creditor immediately, letting them know that the account was opened by a third party committing fraud, that it wasn't opened by the person whose name it was opened under, and ask them to close the account right away. If someone's made charges already or made a purchase in your name, do whatever you can to dispute it. If the bank or credit card company wants you to submit an affidavit, do that. They may have internal forms that they want you to fill out. I would do that right away, and also make a police report. Make sure that somebody in the local law enforcement has heard what happened to you. Also, as Justin said, you should put a fraud. Notify the credit bureaus and let them know that you've been a victim of identity theft, so they can put a fraud alert on your report.
Now, how hard is this for a criminal to do? They'd have to lie and they'd have to come up with a lot of personal information to get a credit card, wouldn't they?
Well, it depends. I mean, with your social security number and your address and your name, it's possible to do a great deal of damage.
What should somebody do if they lose their purse or their wallet?
Well, if, as I said before, closing the accounts that are involved is an important first step to keep unauthorized purchases from being made. And also, making a police report and making that fraud report to the credit reporting bureaus.
Okay.
And I want to echo something that Hope said, is the consumer has to be proactive. I mean, there is no greater advocate for the consumer than that consumer themselves. And you should work with the businesses that are involved and follow their procedures to get this information disputed. But in the end, a consumer cannot hide from this. They cannot put their head in the sand. This will not go away without some proactive action on their part.
Well, maybe one mistake people made is did not read their credit card statements, and then a couple months later they discover they've been paying it for quite a few months. Does that affect how they should dispute it?
Yes, timeliness is very, very important. In fact, some of the legal protections that you get from disputing inaccurate or fraudulent transactions go away if you don't do them quickly enough. So it's really important that people read their statements and report any discrepancies as soon as possible to their credit card companies or banks.
Let's say you're checking your credit or your checking account instead of your credit accounts. There's something wrong with your checking account. What should you do there?
Well, if you can tell, there are different rules depending on whether the transaction was made electronically or whether someone has used paper checks to steal money from your checking account. In both instances, you need to notify the banks, your bank immediately that it's happened, and preferably in writing. Under the Electronic Funds Transfers Act, which is the federal law that governs electronic transfers from your checking account, it's really important to notify your bank immediately. Within 2 days, if you notify your bank of something that's happened, an inadvertent electronic transaction or a fraudulent transaction, you limit your liability to $50. But if you let the transaction hang out there without having told your bank about it for longer, you can be liable for up to $500 if it's been 60 days, and even more than that if you let more time elapse.
Well, let's say the bank is involved and they're investigating someone's account for ID theft because the money's actually been stolen. What can the victim do to prevent problems like canceled checks, or I guess I should say bounced checks, or other issues that come up? What do they do?
Well, if you know that there were certain checks that are missing, for instance, if a booklet of your checks got stolen, then you can stop payment on those checks, and that will help avoid those checks bouncing. You can also ask your bank to close the account so that no more checks will be written on the account, and ask them to notify Check Systems, which is the credit reporting agency that handles reporting checking account information. If the bank notifies Check Systems that you've been a fraud victim, that's another step that they can take to keep further damage from happening.
Well, let's say I paid a bill to some merchant or something, and I put stop payment on the check. Don't I get in trouble with them for doing that?
Well, I guess you have to limit your stop payments to the checks that you know are fraudulent. Right? I mean, you can't stop payment on a check that you know that you legitimately wrote.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like you got to be pretty careful about going through your statements then.
Yeah, you do. You definitely have to look at your statements because checks might be out there that you don't even know exist. If someone had checks printed that looked like your checks but didn't come from your set of checks that you had printed.
Well, let's say you're getting into one of these problem areas and you want to get access to records from the businesses that are involved with processing these transactions. Is there a way you can find out exactly where your credit's been used and how they're doing it?
There is. I mentioned a law that was passed in 2003, the Fair and Accurate Credit Transactions Act. It's a number of changes to the previously existing Fair Credit Reporting Act. Among the changes in the law was something meant to address this situation, which is when you discover that you've been the victim of identity theft, you can contact now the creditor and get copies of the original application and other documents relating to that application for credit. It can help you go back and dispute inaccurate information on your credit report or dispute billing statements or collection letters that you're receiving from the creditor.
Mm-hmm. So you could actually take a look at the application and it might help you figure out how it happened.
That's right.
Well, how should you deal with the debt collectors? Because obviously the bills are being racked up, somebody's buying things in your name. What do you do when the debt collectors call?
Well, that's where all of the information that you've collected already comes in handy. You know, if you've sent letters to the credit bureaus, if you've sent letters to merchants or credit card companies that have been a part of the fraud, then you'll have that at the ready if a debt collector comes knocking. Hopefully, sending copies of those documents to a debt collector will be enough to make them realize that it wasn't your debt and put them off. But if it's a continuing problem and they're threatening to file a lawsuit, then you should probably get legal help.
What's a good way to get legal help? Would you recommend the lawyer referral service, or are there lawyers that specialize in this?
There are a number of good resources. In Oregon, consumers can contact the Oregon State Bar for referrals, the Oregon Trial Lawyers Association. There's a national association called the National Association of Consumer Advocates, the NACA, that also has a lot of referrals and resources that they can give to consumers.
We have a lot of military personnel out of the country that still have things going on in their own name in this country. What could a military person do to avoid their credit being stolen while they're gone?
I'll mention again this same law that we keep talking about, the FACT Act. There is a new provision that allows them to place a block on their credit report while they're on active duty. In general, though, service members should take the same steps that every consumer should take, which is inform themselves about what's on their credit report, promptly dispute in writing inaccurate information that appears on their credit report, and don't ignore this stuff. Again, echoing something that Hope said earlier, is the written record, the paper trail, is so important in ID theft cases because when you call somebody on the phone or you take a phone call from a collector, there's no written record, and it invariably ends up the consumer's word against the business's word. Consumer can take a proactive step and change that by sending their dispute in writing with lots of documentation. If they have a phone call with a debt collector, they can send a follow-up letter saying, this is to confirm our phone call in which you said this and I said this, and here's the documentation I promised I would send. It creates a record of what has happened beyond just the consumer's recollection.
So they should send in a letter saying, I talked to this person on this day and I'm following up with this letter, and then they should save a copy of the letter, I take it.
Absolutely.
Because that would be hard to prove later who you talked to in some of these big companies. Well, what if your name is getting confused with somebody else, but you're not really a victim of ID theft? There are just 3 or 4 people in your city that have the same name. What do you do then?
It happens a lot. I tell consumers and students that I talk to, the number one thing that you can do to prevent credit reporting problems down the road is don't name your son John Smith Jr. It's right off the bat. In a credit reporting sense, they start off with same first name, same last name, and the same home address. But no, it happens that there are a lot of John Smiths living in Portland, Oregon, and if you find that you've been mixed with somebody else's credit, you take the same steps. You contact the credit bureaus. You contact the creditors. You make a written record that this information, whether derogatory or not, does not belong on my credit report.
Now, obviously, if somebody's doing these sorts of things, that's a crime. Would it be a state crime or a federal crime, or how does law enforcement get involved?
I believe that there's a federal law against identity theft, but I think my understanding is that it's the local law enforcement is very heavily involved in at least investigating these cases. But my understanding from talking to the local police is that prosecuting them is a whole different ballgame. It's really difficult because it's often hard to tell who's perpetrating identity theft.
Now, you both say that it's important to file a police report. How would somebody do that? They just call the police and say, this is what's happening, or?
Sure. They can contact their local city or county police. They can also contact the Department of Justice in the state. But the important thing is to make a record, and a formal official public document will go a long way towards when they get a dunning letter or correspondence from a collection agency or credit reporting agency, being able to provide a document that has an official case number that shows the consumer has taken this affirmative step is going to go a long way towards resolving these identity theft problems.
I suppose you want to document for the police exactly what happened, when, and where it happened, and give them the documents you've been giving to everybody else. Is that right?
To the extent that the consumer knows, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I suppose some people might use this as a way of getting out of their bills. Do sometimes people try and say they're a victim when they're not really a victim at all?
I'm sure it happens, but by and large, the vast majority of credit reporting inaccuracies are legitimate because it takes time and effort on the part of the consumer. I don't think that a lot of these consumers that are disputing inaccurate information on their credit reports or fraud items relish it or look forward to it or do it, just to do it. This is something that takes some effort, and the people are out there doing it illegitimately, I think, are in the minority by a long shot.
Do you need a lawyer's help to get this kind of thing started? If you know you're a victim, do you need a lawyer?
No, you don't. You can do this all yourself, and there are for-profit and non-profit organizations out there that will help or charge a fee to do it, but for the most part, by and large, a consumer has the right and the ability to get their credit report and send a letter disputing inaccurate information on their own.
Well, let's say, for example, a consumer does that on their own, and they're trying to get some action, and the credit reporting agencies just won't respond to them and won't help them. Could a lawyer file a lawsuit and force them to fix the problem?
Yes. There's a federal statute that I mentioned before called the Fair Credit Reporting Act. It started as a rather modest federal law governing credit reporting, but in recent years, because of the problems that we've seen with identity theft, with inaccurate credit reports, the law has been expanded and made more specific to address many situations, including identity theft, but also the situation that you described where consumers are merged into a single credit file or credit report. So under this federal law, a consumer that shows that a credit reporting agency or a creditor, a furnisher of credit information has failed to comply with the Fair Credit Reporting Act, a consumer may bring a private lawsuit in court for damages, inappropriate cases, punitive damages, and attorney's fees.
So you could do that then. Well, sometimes people ask for information that you may not want to give. Social Security number, personal information. Are there any laws that regulate that, or advice you'd give people when somebody wants to get their Social Security number?
I would say that there are a lot of cases where a merchant or a bank does need your Social Security number in order to do business with you, but it's going to be asked for when you call the creditor or the merchant. No legitimate bank is going to call you, its customer, and ask for your Social Security number over the phone. So I would, there are cases where you're going to want to do business with somebody, and in order to get it accomplished, when you've initiated the transaction, you're going to need to give them your Social Security number. So it's just a matter of using your discretion and making sure that you're giving it to the merchant or creditor that you think you're giving it to. I would also say it's not a good idea to send your Social Security number by email. Email is a less secure means of communication than the phone.
So basically, if somebody calls you on the phone, you should be suspicious that they're really who they say they are.
Yeah, maybe if you want to. If you think it is a legitimate call, you might call them back at a number that you find independently.
What about some of those websites or pop-ups where they ask you for information, or it looks like they're asking you to put in information about yourself? What should you worry about there?
Well, I would avoid doing that, especially if they ask for something more than just a name or an email address. I think that anytime something on the internet is asking you to enter personal information and it's not a website that you've gone to purposely, like your online banking site, I would just avoid putting any information in there.
I've even heard that sometimes you can type in the wrong website by accident or get directed to a different website, so you really think you are talking to your bank or your merchant and you're really giving information to a criminal. Can that happen?
Sure, it can happen. At the same time, I want to say, even the legitimate sites, you can certainly be diverted to a criminal's website and inadvertently give information away that way. But as Hope said, even the legitimate websites are not as secure, and they're fraught with danger. And as I mentioned at the beginning of our show, the consumers can unwittingly give away rights that we've been talking about with the click of a mouse button, and very frequently using a company's website, whether it be a bank or whether it be one of the credit bureaus, using their website and purchasing products over it can result in a consumer agreeing to terms and conditions of use of the website, and a consumer can give up their rights under that federal law. They may inadvertently agree to not bring cases or not be able to have their cases heard in court, and right without a remedy is no right at all. And so going back to how we dispute and how we make the record, it's very important that snail mail is the consumer's friend here for so many reasons. But my recommendation whenever I talk to a consumer over the phone is you can make that phone call to order your first credit report, but thereafter everything should be done with a hard copy that you keep and over through the postal service, because that's how you keep your rights. And using these websites, there are so many pitfalls and potential stumbling blocks for the consumer. I really discourage people from going to the credit bureau's websites or using the creditors' websites to dispute inaccurate information, just because you can give up so much without knowing it just with the click of a button.
So you could actually give up your rights to go to court, or you'd end up agreeing to arbitration instead, or?
That's right. Or worse. There are terms of use agreements where consumers have to bring their claims within 60 days instead of 2 years that Congress set out in the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Other provisions that say you can't bring a lawsuit against us for damages, and just all these sorts of things. But again, that's one part of the problem. The other part is this written record and not having a paper trail. When people click a mouse button and dispute inaccurate information, they don't have a record of what they disputed, and we rely upon the credit bureaus then to keep the records, and we know that there are issues with the integrity of their records in the first place. That's why you're at their website.
I do a lot of traffic court along with small claims court, and I see people where their cousin or their twin or somebody has used their name to get a traffic ticket and then not paid it. I've even seen cases where they actually went ahead and paid the ticket so their brother wouldn't find out they were driving their car. So do you ever deal with the DMV on issues like this with ID theft?
Occasionally, we do work with other state agencies, and as you mentioned, families are not immune from identity theft, and it does happen. There are cases across the country where family members who have special access to people's identifying information are indeed the thieves. A consumer at that point, to protect their own credit, should take the same actions they should take in any case of identity theft, and one has to make the written record and protect their own credit.
Yeah, that's really important. That's good advice. And of course, people can go to the bar's website for more information about consumer law in general, and encourage people to take advantage of the lawyer referral service. Do you ever work with a lawyer referral, or know lawyers that do that?
I do. I work with the lawyer referral service.
How would that work if somebody signed up for that service?
How would it work for
the consumer? In other words, what would it cost them?
Well, it's actually a really good deal, especially for people who have a smallish sort of case, as a lot of consumer issues often are. With the lawyer referral service, the person who calls gets the name of a lawyer that they can talk to for half an hour for $35, which is a really good rate. And often with consumer law, that's all the advice you need.
Wow, that's great advice. Well, we're running out of time, but thank you so much for coming today, Hope and Justin. I learned a lot myself, and I hope our audience did too. On behalf of the Oregon State Bar, I hope you found this program helpful and informative. For more information about Oregon laws and getting legal help, please visit the bar's website. It's at www.osbar.org. You can also visit our website to comment on this program and give us suggestions for future programs. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon on Legal Links.